You were not a king, not a priest. You did not pass laws. You were only the one who carved them into stone. Babylonian dust under your nails, exhaustion under your skin, fear in your eyes at the thought of making a mistake in front of those in power. These laws promised order and eternity, but for you they were nothing more than cracks in the stele, sweat stains on your brow, and the terror that a single night of rain could wash away months of labor. You saw the king's might dissolve into puddles, and the fate of an entire city balanced on the tip of a dull chisel. You learned to hide the traces of your errors as carefully as officials hid their own fears. But before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is for you. It is really interesting to see who has joined us. Now make yourself comfortable. We are about to begin. You wake before sunrise, not because you wish to, but because the sounds of the city begin long before the light. Somewhere above your small clay-roofed dwelling, a crow caws with the persistence of a tax collector. Babylon stretches around you, a labyrinth of mud brick alleys, and the eternal smell of dust, sweat, and the vague hope that one day someone will invent a decent mattress. Today is the first day of a new task. It is not a task you chose, but then, almost no one here chooses much of anything. The priests and scribes choose, the rest endure. You are an assistant to the stone carver, a profession as glamorous as the sound of chisel on stone at dawn. Your hands are rough, cracked, and stained with the gray memory of limestone dust. Your tunic, once blue, is now the color of resignation. Your feet are calloused, your back aches before you lift a finger, and the only thing sharper than your chisel is your sense of how little you matter in this grand city. You rise and eat a breakfast best described as surviving. There is barley porridge with the flavor of forgotten dreams, goat cheese of questionable age, and water drawn from the public well. The well is not new. In fact, no one remembers it ever being new. Sometimes you think that the city itself is just a collection of old things pretending to be new, much like your masters. As you chew, you consider the local diseases: fever, cough, the perpetual stomach upset that follows any meal, and the slow rot of the spirit. These are as constant as the city walls. You step outside, breathing in the heavy morning air, thick with the promise of heat. The alleys are already alive with voices, vendors, mothers, children, and livestock. All of them move with the same purpose: survive another day without attracting the attention of someone important. It is not a good city for standing out. Today, you will help carve the laws of the king upon a great stele, a monument meant to last for all eternity, or at least until the next war. Rumor has it that the king himself conceived this idea, but you suspect it was a scribe who simply wanted his words to outlast him. Stone, after all, is heavier and more expensive than clay, which makes the message seem more important, even if it is just another list of things not to do. You have never understood why they do not simply use clay tablets for these matters. They are easier to make, easier to break, and much less likely to crush someone's foot. But you do not decide such things. You arrive at the workshop, a broad, dusty courtyard flanked by low stone buildings. The master carver is already there, his face as weathered as the stones he shapes. Around him, your fellow assistants mill like sheep, each pretending to have a purpose. Some sweep the floor, some fetch water, some merely look busy. The tools of your trade are spread out: chisels, mallets, brushes, and slabs of stone. You select your chisel, weighing it in your hand as if it were a scepter. The master carver gathers you around and speaks of the importance of today's work. He says that future generations will look upon this stele and know the will of the king. He does not mention that most generations will avoid looking at it altogether, as they avoid most things that smell of authority. Still, you nod along with everyone else. To disagree would be to draw the master's attention, which is worse than boredom. The first task is the most tedious: preparing the stone. The block must be scrubbed, leveled, and smoothed, every imperfection coaxed away with the patience of a saint. You fetch water from the well, your arms aching with each trip. The sun climbs higher, baking the stones and your skin alike. Dust rises and settles on your arms, your face, your teeth. Somewhere, a supervisor shouts for more water, more effort, more everything. The work is endless and the rewards invisible. As you work, you contemplate the nature of laws. Are they truly eternal or just temporary solutions given the illusion of permanence? Will these words matter to anyone in 100 years or even 100 days? The master insists that stone lasts forever, but you have seen what time and weather can do to the finest carvings. Clay at least has the dignity to admit its own fragility. The morning wears on, and you find yourself daydreaming of simpler labors. The potter's kilns smell better, and their work, while fleeting, is at least appreciated at mealtime. Instead, you are here, sweating in the shadow of a block of stone, listening to the master drone on about the glory of Babylon. You have heard it all before. The city is the greatest in the world. The king is wise beyond measure, and your work is a sacred duty. In reality, the city is crowded, the king is distant, and your only duty is to make sure you do not chip the stone in the wrong place. When noon arrives, you and your fellows gather in the shade to eat. The conversation is as predictable as the food: complaints about the heat, rumors about the king, speculation about what will happen if someone makes a mistake. You listen more than you speak. In Babylon, words can be dangerous, and silence is sometimes the only protection. In the afternoon, the supervisors arrive. They bring with them a sense of urgency and the faint aroma of perfumed oil. Their robes are clean, their hands are soft, and their voices are sharp. They inspect your work, pointing out invisible flaws and demanding impossible perfection. You nod and promise to do better, knowing that perfection is a myth, like honest merchants or pleasant surprises. As the sun begins to set, you clean your tools and brush the dust from your tunic. Your hands are sore, Your back is stiff and your mind is numb. The master gives a brief speech about tomorrow's tasks: more cleaning, more leveling, more preparation. The real carving will not begin until the stone is flawless, which, in your experience, means never. You trudge home through the labyrinth of Babylon, your thoughts as heavy as the stone you serve. The city is alive with noise, laughter, arguments, the distant sound of music. Somewhere, a child cries. Somewhere, a priest prays. Somewhere, you wonder if any of it means anything at all. You fall asleep as you woke, tired, sore, and surrounded by dust. In the distance, the unfinished stele waits, patient as eternity, for you to give it a voice it may never deserve. You wake to the sound of someone pounding on the workshop's heavy wooden doors. You have grown so accustomed to the clatter of the city that it takes several moments to realize this noise means something is different today. The master carver shouts your name, his voice already hoarse from shouting at the rising sun. You stumble from your sleeping mat, wipe the stone dust from your eyes, and join your fellow assistants as you shuffle outside. The city is barely awake, but in the palace district, the day has begun with an intensity that feels foreign, almost unnatural. You are told to wash your face, to try, for once, to look less like someone who sleeps among stone chips. It is a futile effort. The water is as warm as spit and tastes of clay. The master does not care. He cares only that you stand in line and look properly deferential. The workshop's doors open, and in sweep the king's men. There are 4 of them, no, 5, counting the scribe, who carries a heavy scroll as if it contains the fate of the world. Their clothes are freshly laundered, their beards oiled, their eyes sharp. You sense that today the stone will begin to remember. The king himself is not present, of course. Kings rarely are. His absence is nevertheless felt in every sharp word and every scrutinizing glance cast by his representatives. The scribe unrolls the scroll with great ceremony, as if revealing the entrails of a sacrificial animal. You catch glimpses of the symbols, lines of cuneiform neatly pressed in dark ink. The laws are many. They are written in the king's name, but you suspect that every official who has ever feared losing a goat has contributed to this list. You and the master carver are chosen to begin transferring these first words onto the pristine, leveled surface of the stele. The master carver runs his fingers over the stone as a priest might handle a relic, mumbling about gods and omens and the importance of clear lines. You are told to fetch more water, to wet the stone just so, and to hold the string straight as the master marks the grid lines for the text. It is a ceremony of sorts, a grim, tedious one. You stand behind the master carver, holding a thin reed dipped in dark pigment. Your job is to mark the guidelines, copying the scribe's careful notation. The pigment stains your fingers. You know it will not wash off for days. The master's hands are steady, even as his knees creak and his back complains with every lean forward. He mutters about the weight of the stone, the burden of law, and the endlessness of this city's ambitions. You nod, though you are not sure if he is speaking to you or to the stone. As you work, the scribe reads the laws aloud, his voice slow and deliberate. Some words are in the ancient tongue of Sumer, some in the more common Akkadian. Arguments break out. The scribe insists on the traditional phrases. The king's advisor wants the words to be understood by everyone, especially the ones likely to break the laws. A third official, a minor priest, points out that the goddess Ishtar's name is missing from the dedication. There is muttering, whispering, the slow unraveling of patience. You wonder how many laws will be broken before the last law is carved. You think of the first lines that you and the master must chisel into the stone. They concern theft, property, and the penalties for those who would take what is not theirs. The punishments are many and severe. If a man steals an ox, he will repay 30 times its value or be thrown into the river. If a woman is caught with a stolen loaf, she will be branded with the mark of shame. The city is hungry for order, but you suspect that stone cannot feed it. Your work is slow. Each symbol must be placed perfectly, every line straight, every space exact. If you err, the master will know. If the master does not notice, the scribe surely will. If by some miracle your mistake passes through all these eyes, the next flood will reveal it to the world, as water wears away even the king's name. You feel the pressure of this responsibility in your knuckles, your shoulders, your bones. You glance up from the stone and see one of your fellow assistants struggling to hold the scaffold steady. The block of stone is taller than 2 men and wider than 3. Its weight is a constant reminder of the king's will and of gravity's indifference to human plans. Someone drops a mallet. Someone else curses. The scribe sighs so loudly that the master threatens to throw him into the kiln. It is all very ceremonial. By midday, you have finished only the first few lines. The scribe is impatient. He demands that the work proceed more quickly, but the master carver refuses. The king wants these words to last forever, he says, so they must be cut slow and deep. The scribe makes a note in his tablet. You suspect it is not a compliment. There is, as always, more water to fetch. You slip on the wet stones, nearly dropping the pail. The other assistants are no better. Someone has spilled half the water on the ground, creating a muddy patch that will haunt your sandals for weeks. The master does not yell, he merely glares, and the weight of his silence is heavier than any stone. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, you are exhausted. Your hands tremble, your knees ache, your head rings with the echo of the scribe's voice. Still, you must help clean the stone, brush away the dust, and lay fresh pigment for the next day. The master walks the length of the stele, inspecting each line, each groove. He grunts approval at your work, but you know that one slip tomorrow will erase today's small victories. As you leave the workshop, you hear the scribe and the king's advisor still arguing over a phrase in the law. Should a debtor's children be taken as payment, or only his livestock? Is the penalty for breaking a dam worse than the penalty for breaking a marriage vow? You do not know. You are just an assistant, a shadow among the stones. At night, you lie awake, the city buzzing outside your window. You think of the laws that will shape the lives of people you will never meet. You think of the words that must be carved, the mistakes that must be avoided, the pain that will come to those who displease the king. In the darkness, you imagine the stele standing tall, its words untouched by time or rain, while you and everyone you know fade into the dust that covers everything in Babylon. Tomorrow, the carving will continue. Tomorrow, the words will become stone. And tomorrow, you will wake once again to the weight of work and the knowledge that in the end, even stone is not forever. Another morning arrives in Babylon, thick with the smell of yesterday's sweat and the promise of more to come. The city hums, but you move through it as if wading through clay. By now, the novelty of working on the king's stele has faded, replaced by a dull ache in your arms and a kind of philosophical fatigue that settles behind your eyes. You once thought there might be glory in carving the king's will into stone. You now know that the only certainty is back pain. The days blend together, each indistinguishable from the last. The first thing you notice each morning is the scent: sweat, oil, dust, and the faint trace of something sour that never quite leaves the workshop. It seeps into your skin, your hair, your dreams. The stone itself seems to sweat. Your tunic, which you try to wash each week, grows heavier with the dust of the city and the secrets of the law. The labor is endless. Someone must sweep the floor. Someone else must carry water. Another sharpens chisels already worn thin from endless scraping. Your job is to help trace new lines on the stone, marking where the next commandments of the king will live for all eternity, or at least until an ambitious conqueror decides to break the stele in two. You listen as the scribes and officials debate each law before it is given to the stone. There is no shortage of opinions. Today's law concerns the penalty for stealing an ox, an act which apparently threatens the very foundation of civilization. The punishment is severe. If a man steals an ox, he must return not one, not two, but 30 times its value, or, failing that, be thrown into the river. You picture the river, wide and brown, sluggishly carrying away those who fall afoul of the law, and you wonder if the river has grown crowded with the bodies of thieves and debtors. Tomorrow's law is no less dire. If a builder erects a house and the house collapses and kills the owner, the builder will be put to death. If it kills the owner's son, the builder's son will be put to death. You pause at this, trying to decide whether it is justice or arithmetic. The scribes argue, the master carver sighs, and you keep marking lines on the stone, your hands moving mechanically. At midday, the heat becomes unbearable. The workshop is an oven. The dust clings to every surface, and the workers grow irritable. Arguments erupt over nothing. Who spilled the water? Who left the door open? who sharpened a chisel poorly. One assistant cuts his hand, another curses the gods and the king in the same breath. The master carver, unmoved, continues his slow, steady work, as if chiseling each line were a prayer. The list of laws grows longer each day. There are laws for everything: marriage, inheritance, irrigation, debt, adoption, assault, and even the price of beer. The officials take turns reading them aloud, their voices rising and falling like the city's walls. Some laws are so detailed that you wonder how anyone could remember them. Others are so vague that you suspect even the king would struggle to explain them. You notice that the process for each law is the same. The officials debate, the scribes write, the master marks the stone, and you and the other assistants carve the lines letter by letter. The work is slow. It must be. Each mistake means days of repair. Once, a careless mark nearly erased a law about dowries, and for 2 days the workshop rang with shouts and accusations until the master found a way to fix it. You learned then that the only thing more dangerous than a broken law is an embarrassed official. Your hands ache with each stroke. The chisels break. Your fingers bleed. One day, a chisel snaps, sending a shard of iron flying across the room. It strikes the master's sandal, missing his toes by a whisper. The silence that follows is heavier than the stone. Later, you hear him muttering to himself, cursing the gods of metal and law alike. In the evenings, after the day's last line has been marked and the last official has departed, you and the others gather in the corner of the workshop to eat. The food is always the same: bread, onions, sometimes cheese, if the mice have not gotten there first. You talk of little things: a new child born, a neighbor's illness, rumors of war at the border. No one speaks of the stele. It is always there, always watching, a mute judge in the darkness. Some nights there is a ceremony of sorts. The master offers thanks to the gods for another day without catastrophe. The officials pour a libation of sour wine onto the ground, pretending it is a blessing. The workers drink what is left, grimacing at the taste. The bread is stale, the wine worse, but you eat and drink anyway, because it is what you do. You find yourself growing numb to the laws, the officials, even the stone. Each day brings more rules, more punishments, more reminders of the king's authority. The laws blur together. If a man blinds another, his own eye is to be blinded. If a woman strikes her mother, she is to be exiled. If a judge makes a mistake, he is to pay with silver or his tongue. It all seems designed not to keep order, but to remind everyone that the king's word is heavier than stone. As you fall asleep, you wonder if anyone will ever read all these words. Perhaps, centuries from now, another tired assistant will brush the dust from this stele and marvel at the punishments for crimes no one remembers. Or perhaps the stone will crack, the city will fall, and the river will carry the laws away, as it does everything else. In Babylon, nothing lasts forever, not the city, Not the king, not the words you carve until your hands tremble. Only the routine remains, the smell of dust, the ache of labor, and the knowledge that tomorrow there will be more laws to carve, more punishments to imagine, and more stone dust in your hair. You had foolishly believed that routine was the only certainty in Babylon. The stone, it seems, has other plans. The day begins, as always, sweat, dust, the brittle laughter of workers hiding their dread behind worn faces. The master carver barks the morning litany. Do not chip the edge. Do not mark outside the line. Do not let the water spill. As if these rituals could hold back disaster. The city itself is a patchwork of attempts to keep chaos at bay. Still, the illusion of order lasts only as long as the sky remains cloudless. This morning, the clouds gather thick and bruised above the city. The air tastes metallic, full of unshed rain. You sense a shift, the kind you feel in your joints when a storm is coming. As you scrub the stone for the 100th time, a thunderclap rolls through Babylon, and you flinch, nearly dropping your chisel. The master mutters that the gods are restless. You have learned to ignore his omens until today. The rain arrives not as a gentle shower, but as a deluge. Water pours from the heavens, turning the workshop courtyard into a shallow lake. Tools are lost in the muck, assistants slip and curse, and the carefully covered stele is battered by the downpour. You and the others scramble to protect it with reed mats, but the wind tears them away like so many scraps of hope. In minutes, all your careful smoothing and etching is lost beneath rivulets of dirty water. Someone wails that the river will claim the laws before the people ever can. When the sky clears, the damage is obvious. Cracks have appeared in the upper part of the stone, fine at first, like the lines in an old man's face, then deeper, splitting words and swallowing the labor of days. A chunk of carved text, the law regarding inheritance and property, has crumbled away entirely, now just mud at your feet. The master carver sits on a block of sandstone, staring at the ruin as if hoping it might unbreak itself. For once, no one speaks. The silence is broken by a cry at the workshop gate. The king's men have arrived, trailed by the royal advisor and a cluster of scribes. Their robes, dry and spotless, seem an insult against the chaos of the yard. At their head is the royal inspector, a man whose frown is said to wilt the fig trees. He surveys the scene, nostrils flaring at the muddy ground and cracked stone. Questions come like arrows. Who let the rain in? Why was the stone not covered? Who is responsible for this travesty? The master tries to explain the force of the storm, the strength of the wind, the inevitability of fate. The inspector is unmoved. He orders everyone to line up. Your name is called, you step forward, dripping, hair plastered to your forehead, and try not to look guilty of the weather. The inspector circles the stele, trailing his fingers over the cracks, pausing at the worst places. What is this? He demands, pointing to a spot where the word ox has been obliterated and, in the confusion of repair, replaced with a character that means enemy. The scribes whisper furiously among themselves. A priest hisses that this is a bad omen. You try to appear invisible. The master carver attempts to explain. A slip of the chisel, a mark too deep, perhaps a tired hand. The inspector is not impressed. He threatens to call for a new stone entirely, to begin again from the start. You imagine weeks of lost work, the punishment for failure, the way these days will blur into each other until you are old, gray, and still chasing the perfection of a stone that refuses to yield. To salvage the stele, the master devises a desperate plan. The apprentices are set to grinding new pigment, mixing clay to fill the worst cracks and smoothing the battered surface. You, less lucky, are assigned the work of erasing mistakes, scraping away the word enemy, hoping no one notices the rough patch left behind. The priest stands nearby, muttering a litany of curses and blessings, as if to confuse the gods long enough for the repairs to escape notice. You discover a new art, the art of hiding failure. If you press hard enough, you can smooth a crack into something that resembles a shadow. If you mix the pigment just right, the old letters blend with the new, but you can never uncarve what has been cut too deep. You imagine future generations squinting at the uneven lines, inventing explanations for the odd patchwork of characters. Perhaps they will blame invaders, or earthquakes, or some inscrutable ritual. You know the truth: exhaustion, carelessness, the merciless weight of time. At last, the inspector returns. The master, sweat streaking his brow, leads him along the repaired stele, narrating each restored law as if unveiling a new wonder. The inspector's eyes narrow at the fixes, but he says nothing. When he reaches the spot where enemy once lived, he hesitates, then grunts. The priest offers a prayer of thanks, though you suspect it is less for the gods and more for his own skin. That night, the workshop is quieter than usual. The master dismisses everyone early, instructing you to bring wine, real wine, not the sour dregs reserved for workers. The apprentices drink in silence. Someone begins to laugh, high and wild, until the master silences him with a look. You sit against the cool stone, feeling the cracks beneath your fingers, and try to convince yourself that the repairs will hold. You have learned something new. In Babylon, as in all things, survival is less about perfection and more about hiding the evidence of your failures. You look at the stele, patched and imperfect, and realize that this, too, is a kind of law. Nothing is ever truly finished, no mistake is ever truly erased, and even the king's word is vulnerable to rain and time. In the end, the only thing more eternal than stone is the effort to keep the truth buried just beneath the surface. The final days arrive not with triumph, but with a dull ache that settles in your bones. The air in the workshop is heavy and still. Everyone moves with the sluggishness of men who have spent too long breathing in stone dust and disappointment. The stele stands upright, patched and scarred, yet imposing all the same. It looms over you, less a monument to order and justice, more a silent witness to every misstep, every shortcut, every crack hastily filled, and line awkwardly recut. Your tasks are no longer frantic, but methodical. You pass your hands over the stone, searching for rough patches, for places where the rain's fury lingers, or the chisel slipped in exhaustion. Some cracks you cannot disguise, and so you smooth them with a mixture of clay and pigment, creating a subtle mosaic of damage and repair. The master is relentless in his inspections, running his finger along every law, every groove, his frown deepening with each flaw discovered. Yet even he is weary now, his once booming orders replaced with muttered curses and short sighs. You help the scribes with the final review. They read each line aloud, their voices monotonous, eyes glazed. No one is truly listening. The laws march past: theft, inheritance, marriage, trade, murder, irrigation, all blending into a droning chant that echoes off the workshop's walls. You wonder how many of these rules will actually be enforced, and how many will become just another story whispered over flatbread in the marketplace, twisted and softened by the tongue, until even the king would not recognize his own decree. As the last corrections are made, the workers gather for the finishing touches. The master directs you to brush away the dust, to polish the stone until it catches the light of the morning sun. The pigment, newly mixed, fills the deepest letters, dark against the pale stone. The priest blesses the monument one final time, waving incense that barely masks the workshop's stink of sweat and fear. It is a small ceremony, no more solemn than the daily meal, no more meaningful than the thousands of other rituals the city invents to keep the gods distracted. The day of unveiling arrives with as much ceremony as Babylon can muster. Trumpets sound in the main square. Officials gather in their finest robes. The king himself arrives, or so the herald claims, though you catch only a glimpse of a bearded figure atop a litter, eyes hooded, and expression unreadable. The master presents the stele, reciting a speech he has practiced for weeks, his voice trembling only once when he mentions the unbreakable permanence of the king's word. You stand among the workers at the edge of the crowd, watching as the officials pretend to admire the monument. Some of them lean in, tracing their fingers over the laws, mouthing the words as if seeking secret wisdom. Most simply nod, their minds already wandering to the next decree, the next tax, the next public execution. A group of children darts through the square, throwing stones at the base of the stele when no one is looking. You catch their eyes for a moment. They grin, and you see in their faces a mixture of mischief and boredom that feels more eternal than any law. After the ceremony, the crowd disperses. The king is gone. The officials return to their ledgers. The stele remains, tall and proud, yet already fading into the background noise of the city. People pass by without a glance. A dog lifts its leg at the base. The priest mutters that this is a sign of good luck. You suspect otherwise. The master calls you aside, pressing a small coin into your palm. For your labor, he says, though his eyes flicker with something like apology. You are dismissed, just another shadow among thousands in Babylon. The other assistants leave quickly, some eager to spend their wages on cheap wine, others simply eager to sleep without dreaming of broken stone. As evening falls, you return to the square. The sun sets behind the city walls, painting the stele in hues of gold and shadow. For a moment, you are alone with your work, with all its imperfections and compromises. You run your fingers over the cool surface, tracing the patched cracks, the uneven letters, the scars that speak louder than the words themselves. You wonder what will become of this monument. Perhaps it will stand for centuries, misread and misinterpreted by generations yet unborn. Perhaps a conquering army will topple it and use the pieces to build a new wall, a new city, a new story. Or perhaps the river will rise one spring and sweep it all away, erasing every law, every punishment, every hope. In the end, you feel not pride, but a kind of quiet relief. You have survived the labor, outlasted the curses and the cracks, learned the difference between perfection and persistence. You are not remembered in the laws, not named in any inscription, not even mentioned by the master. Your work is invisible, like the sweat that dries and disappears, like the prayers whispered into the storm. You leave the square behind, walking the crooked streets of Babylon, the dust swirling at your heels. Somewhere, the king dreams of immortality. Somewhere, a child hurls a stone at your monument. Somewhere, the river waits, patient as time. And you, anonymous and aching, return home, carrying nothing but the memory of the laws you helped carve and the knowledge that in Babylon, even stone forgets.